में ना मैं तप में ना मैं व्रत उपास में.
Thank you. Good morning. My name is Stephen Orlov. On behalf of Daya's family, Shri, Rahul and Dipti, Rohit, Roli, Krishna, and others, I'm honored to welcome you all and thank you for joining in this celebration of the life and the legacy of this extraordinary man, Daya Varma. First, just a reminder, I know some of you were not able to sign the memorial book because of the time element, so be sure to sign it before you depart. And for those who wish to order Daya's books or to make a contribution to the Heart and Stroke Foundation that supported Daya's work for so many years, brochures and information are available on the display table next to his books. I met Daya over 40 years ago when I first moved to Montreal for graduate studies at McGill. He was already an esteemed professor of pharmacology, but it wasn't in the classroom that we met. I and a few other McGill students were drawn to a group of third world activists committed to solidarity work against apartheid and the Vietnam War in support of national liberation movements and social justice in the third world. Daya was our inspirational leader. Whenever he walked into a meeting, he always hung his ego on a coat rack. For him, personal differences weren't crucial. They were petty. His goal was to get the job done. The harder the debate, the more he listened. And he usually spoke last, offering insight and direction often overlooked. Daya was a revolutionary who boldly challenged and defied conventional wisdom with critical thought. He had an encyclopedic knowledge of history and political theory, but he led through words, mostly through action more than words. His activism was not drawn merely from the pages of a book. It was fueled by his own personal experiences growing up in a poor Indian village. And the challenging lessons that he embraced during those formative years really directed his journey throughout his life. But what I learned most from my mentor was not his politics, it was his values. Like some activists of the day, I was prone to moments of dogma, despite good intentions. And sometimes that dogma compromised personal relations, but time and again, Daya would teach me by example how to treat people with dignity, respect, and compassion. I'll never forget Daya's gesture of kindness when I separated from my ex-wife 30 years ago. He invited me to move temporarily into his tiny house in Grand Boulevard that he shared with Rahul, his son, and another friend, Minu. And it wasn't just his invitation that touched me, it was how matter-of-factly he extended it immediately, without a second thought. It was almost like a directive more than an invitation. I even accommodated sleepovers by my daughter Emily, who was 3 at the time, and my mother when she visited from Boston. But that's how Daya was, and that's how I'll always remember him. In the best of ways, Daya was very much his own man, but he realized early on that social reform and revolutionary change require collective action. And on all levels, political, personal, and professional. Daya thrived best with you, Shri, by his side. You supported his work in so many ways as he did for you. As Daya aged, his analysis of international conflicts, became even more insightful, more layered, rejecting the notion that the course of history in the making could somehow be molded into a rigid, static formula. When he moved with Shri to St. John's, we really spoke. And I only got to see him on return visits. But we'd always pick up where we left off. It was as if he had never moved. And many of his friends, we wondered how he would cope, isolated in a maritime community not particularly known for global activism. We needn't have worried. Daya threw himself with great tenacity and focus into researching, writing 2 new books, groundbreaking works of mammoth thematic scope, both histories of medicine, progressive histories of medicine. And the last one he even polish edited during his terminal illness. Throughout his life, Daya Varma cast the shadow of a giant. And on his path, he left a signature footprint marked by strength and integrity. I would now like to introduce Hita Raghunathan. Hita is a well-known performer of vocal classical Indian music. She is very active in Montreal's Kabir Center for Arts and Culture. And she'll sing a song, which is a poem by Kabir, a favorite 15th century poet of Daya.
Everyone, my name is Hita, and I've known Daya ever since I arrived in 1990. I feel very privileged to be a part of the celebration of Daya's life today, and I will sing a bhajan written by the 14th century poet Kabir. Kabir, as many of you know, through his simple poetry, questioned the established beliefs of all religions and awaken the spirit of universal love in human beings. I hope that this bhajan would be very relevant as a prelude to the celebration of life. The meaning of this bhajan is as follows. My friends, where are you looking for me? I'm right here, very close to you. Not in pilgrimage, not in icons, not in solitude, not in temples nor in mosques. I'm right here, very close to you. Not in prayers or penance, not in renunciation, not in rites and rituals, not even in renunciation of it all. Seek earnestly and discover at once in that moment of search where your fate lies. That is where I am. That is where I am. ढूंढे बंदे ढूंढे बंदे, ना मैं जप में ना मैं तप में, ना मैं जप में ना मैं तप में, ना मैं व्रत उपास में, ना मैं जप में ना मैं तप में, ना मैं व्रत उपास में, ना मैं क्रिया कर्म में रहता, ना मैं क्रिया कर्म में रहता, ना ही योग संन्यास में, मैं तो तेरे पास में मुझको कहाँ तू ढूंढे बंदे, खोजी हो या तुरंत मिल जाऊं, एक पल की तलाश में, खोजी हो या तुरंत मिल जाऊं, एक पल की तलाश में, कह कबीर सुनो भाई साधो, कह कबीर सुनो भाई साधो, मैं तो हूँ विश्वास में, 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 मैं तो हूँ विश्वास में।
Thank you, Rita. Rolly's daughter, Rolly, who's the only daughter of Daya, could not be here at this gathering. She last week and able to travel. Rolly did send us a photo and memoir tribute to Daya entitled "My Father and I, An End of a Journey." Daya's oldest granddaughter, Ila, who is doing her PhD in mathematics, is looking after her mother in Albuquerque. I'll just mention that if any of you wish to say a few words, and I would ask you to keep it to just a couple minutes if we have time at the end, would you please approach Rana? Rana, could you just identify yourself? Rana is going to have some slips of paper, and so he'll collect the names, and hopefully we'll have time. I would next ask Dr. Sylvain Chamteau to come. He would like to say a few words. He's a neonatologist and professor of pediatrics at Université de Montreal. Daya co-supervised with Dr. Jacob Aranda Sylvain's PhD research, and over the decades they've collaborated in research and co-published numerous scientific papers. Dr. Chamteau.
I'd like to share some personal experiences and thoughts of Daya. I've known Daya for about 30 years. So I first met Daya as a PhD student. He was a true inspiration, not only to me, but numerous other students, some of which are actually in this audience, to younger staff, and even to more established staff. But our relationship actually, Daya really evolved beyond this, and over time, became like a second father to me. I first met Dr. Varma in 1985, when actually I had started my PhD under the supervision of Dr. Jacob Varma in pharmacology at McGill University. And at the time, he actually felt that I would probably benefit from a solid co-supervision. And so he suggested I actually see Dr. Varma. And indeed, very quickly, I began to spend more and more time in his lab. He taught me a lot of things. He taught me how to structure my ideas, my thoughts, in an addressable manner. To conceive solutions, he taught me not to be afraid to ask complicated questions that required new techniques. I thank him, among many other things, for encouraging me and giving me this confidence needed to embark towards new horizons. He was particularly interested in studies that would end up benefiting patient care, which is characteristic of his humanity. And as a physician myself, I thought that that was more practical. Daya was quite passionate of his work, and he conveyed his passion. Yet, as a profoundly humble man, he never really sought honors. He was always ready to help and give in good faith. Not for his own benefit, but for that of others. Daya led his life with honor, respect, justice, and nobility. He was among the last truly gentleman scientists. He was not after mercantile benefits, but rather he was truly concerned by injustices in the world, both in the developed and in the underdeveloped world. We all know of Daya's lifelong dedication to equality, to justice, and to peace. He founded and supported many progressive organizations. On a personal basis, I was particularly markedly touched by his profound concern of the notorious Bhopal disaster, which happened a year before I met him in 1984, when a major leak of methyl isocyanate from the company Union Carbide had actually led to the death of more than 4,000 inhabitants and injured over 500,000. He integrated a humanitarian solution in his own research projects to elucidate the adverse effects of methyl isocyanate acutely, but more importantly, long-term project. I witnessed many of his grants and studies on the subject. He traveled to Bhopal to meet lead hospital personnel to denounce this atrocity by understanding and divulging its human implications. He produced numerous documents, participated in the commemoration of the 20th anniversary of this disaster. Some of his work was published in the prestigious journal JAMA in 2003. This scientific and human implication highlights his passion of science for the well-being of humanity. Daya was a true mentor. At one point, halfway through my PhD, I started to become discouraged. And I couldn't see the end of it in sight. Questioned whether it was really worth continuing to pursue this degree. I was already a physician at the time, so I addressed it to Daya. He sat with me to put the completed work in perspective, and he helped me plan what was needed for completion. And 2 years later, Daya was a great teacher. He taught me to write scientific reports, grants, papers. Anecdotally, I experienced a humbling event for my FACE paper as a PhD student. After having submitted my first paper unsuccessfully to various journals, despite its approval by my main supervisor, Dr. Jacob Miranda, I finally decided to get a second opinion by consulting Daya. And he gladly accepted and told me he would get back to me soon. Indeed, 1 week later, after I had given him the document, he asked to see me. Upon meeting me, he said, "Sit down. I hope you're not going to be offended. The only text I have left untouched was your name." The paper was submitted and immediately accepted with minor revision. He was a prolific, precise, and concise, elegant writer, and he conveyed this important element to me. Daya and I co-authored 95 papers, and Daya himself was author of more than 225 papers and 2 books. Upon finishing my PhD, I was offered a postdoc position at the University of Iowa. I discussed it with who else but Daya, and he strongly encouraged me to go ahead. Within a year that I was in Iowa, I was contacted by the University of Montreal, McGill, and other institutions for a staff position back in Quebec. So I called Daya to discuss it. And he obviously didn't hesitate to help me. So Daya coached me in writing my first MRC grant. At the time it was called the Medical Research Council of Canada in 1990, which I successfully obtained. I was lucky. But this was not sufficient for Daya. And he said, "Silva, you need another grant." Unfortunately, it coincided with my move back to Montreal in September '91. So Daya refused this excuse. He says, "I'll help you." So I responded, "Daya, Lucy, my wife, is going to kill me for not being readily available during our move." This didn't faze him, and we went ahead, prepared it, and submitted it. There was no internet, there was no emails at the time. This is 1991. I really thank him for instilling this discipline. The application was luckily approved, and Lucy and I are still together. Daya was rigorous, and as a mentor, he was quite demanding. I remember an application preparation which we prepared for the Medical Research Council of Canada in the mid-90s, which I brought over to Daya lab in office for signature on the day prior to submission. He spent a good portion of that night making changes. The next day, he didn't hesitate to express his disappointment for last-minute changes. And he says, very frankly, "So I'll never do this again." I owe a lot of my achievements to this honorable man, and I was really privileged to have crossed his life. Over the years, my relationship with Daya actually evolved and was transformed as he became a friend and even a second father figure. I shared many personal events, life events with him. In fact, Daya attended my wedding, my son's bar mitzvahs, and most of the parties, end of the year parties of our lab. We were very close. We also shared a love for dogs. And as you know, he was very close to his own dog. And when I had lost my previous dog, Brandon, Daya was really very comforting. And I did the same, when Daya lost Miss J. We have lost a highly intelligent, profoundly confident. He was wise. He carried very well his name. The loss is still fresh. It's endeared. But he shall remain in my spirit and my life.
Thank you. I would like to read a message that has been sent by V. Ramana Dahara, who's the adjunct clinical professor, Morehouse School of Medicine and Rollins School of Public Health of Emory University in Atlanta, Georgia. Dr. Varma was a humanist and researcher on the Bhopal disaster. He went to Bhopal out of concern for the victims and initiated several studies into the nature of the deadly gas leak in the midst of an intensely political climate. His work was instrumental in throwing light on the toxic effects of the disaster. We were co-panelists at the well-attended Society of Toxicology Bhopal Symposium in 2009. And his talk demonstrated his scientific integrity and ability to acknowledge uncertainty in issues which were still evolving. His work on Bhopal will be well remembered by victims and researchers all over the world. I would suggest if those of you who are standing, if you would like, feel comfortable to sit on the carpet, you could come into the aisles and do so. There's no formality here today. If you feel more comfortable doing that. I would now welcome Dr. Richard Gillis, who's a professor of pharmacology at Georgetown University. He was a student at McGill soon after Daya obtained his PhD, and they shared a keen interest in mathematics and science. Dr. Gillis.
Dr. Varma had such an incredible influence on my life, on my life of my beloved wife, Carol. He taught me how to teach. He taught me how to do research. I first knew Dr. Varma as a student at McGill during the early 1960s. He was a role model for me then and will remain so forever. As a graduate student in pharmacology, at that time, I often found myself spending 24 hours a day doing research. So I pulled a number of overnighters. And on one occasion, when I was there doing research, at 4 in the morning, I was so surprised. Dr. Varma showed up, and his hair was uncombed, looked really disheveled. And I asked him, "What in the world are you doing here?" And he said, "I was woken out of a sound sleep by this great idea that I had. And I came into the lab to test it." And I then carried out what I planned to do during the day, went to classes, and I was eager to go back and see Dr. Varma and see how his idea had turned out. So when I went back to see him, he had done not one experiment, but several experiments, and I asked him, "How did your idea turn out?" And again, I was surprised. He said to me, "What idea was that?" What happened was, as he was doing the experiment, he had another idea, and he was pursuing that idea. As I witnessed this, I knew that seeking answers to research questions would be my life career. So you can see right off what an incredible impact this extraordinary man had on my life. After graduate school, I did a postdoc, and as mentioned, was fortunate to get an academic position at Georgetown University. And in mid-career, I became very interested in the brain and cardiac arrhythmias. I had this feeling, this intuition, that many of the arrhythmias that occur in patients do so because of disturbance in brain function. But I didn't really know, I didn't have a good way to approach that problem, how to really dig into this problem and obtain evidence and then use that evidence in a way that would be, would actually impact the patient. So when I was in that bind, and whenever I was in that bind, what I would do is I would contact Dr. Varma, and I would tell him, this is what I'm thinking of doing. Do you have a suggestion how to approach this problem? And what he told me was, thinking about the brain, the major transmitter in the brain is gamma aminobutyric acid, or GABA. He suggested to me that what I should do is to try to block GABA in specific areas of the brain, and do this while I was monitoring autonomic nervous system activity to the heart, as well as monitoring the electrocardiogram. And I did this. I did what Daya suggested. And what happened was I had several students do their PhD thesis on this problem. I had several grants funded by NIH. And in addition, I got so interested in another research career, which was brain-controlled gastrointestinal function. Again, incredible impact of Dr. Varma. Over the years, when I would submit a paper to a journal, I would often submit it to Daya. Why would I do this? There are two reasons. First of all, I wanted to seek his approval. I was still his student. Second, I was so eager to hear what he thought might be the next experiment to do that would advance my science. And because of that input, most people, when they get to midlife, their career kind of reaches a plateau. Because of Daya's input, I think I was able to counteract that plateau. In one of my last conversations with Daya, I was talking to him, and he told me that he had diabetes, and that he was taking this drug called metformin, and he found that this drug metformin caused him to lose weight. And he asked me, Dick, do you know how metformin causes weight loss? I did not have the answer to that question. But what Daya did again is he changed the whole direction of our laboratory. Now we are studying obesity, and we're trying to find out how metformin causes weight loss. I have always known Daya as a friend, the best friend I ever had. And you've heard several reasons why that is. I want to tell you another reason. A medicine my beloved wife had been taken off the market in the United States. And we would come up to Canada once a year, and we would purchase that medicine in Montreal, and we'd stock up for the whole year. Then I heard that that medicine was going to be taken off the market in Canada. And I was desperate. We were in a crisis. So I called Daya, and I told Daya, I'm going to come up to Montreal, and I'm going to go to every drugstore and buy whatever medicine they have left in the drugstore. And what he did for me was so extraordinary. What he did, and how do you find people like this that'll do what he did? What he did was he said, Dick, don't come to Montreal. What he did was he contacted his friends in cities across Canada. He asked them to buy that drug and to send it to him. And then he sent that drug to us. Through Daya's great kindness, compassion, and friendship, Carol and I had a lifetime supply of this drug that she so badly needed for her health. And so thankful and grateful to Daya, always will be my role model and teacher. And I want to end by telling you one other thing that happened to me. And it happened very recently. Before I came up to Montreal, he sent me his wonderful book, superb book, The Art and Science of Healing Since Antiquity. And I had read that book, and I tried hard to put together a review of his book, but didn't feel I had the confidence to do it. But I've read quite a few chapters several times, and it's a great book. But what happened to me was, before I came to Montreal, I looked at the first page, which I hadn't looked at before. And on the first page of that book, he wrote these words to me. What Daya said was, "For such a long and never-ending help in every which way I sought." Daya Varma, May 1st, 2011. I will always treasure these words and try to live up to them in all my relationships. Thank you, Daya.
Thank you, Dr. Gillis. I'd now like to invite Dr. David Morris. He is an endocrinologist at the McGill University Health Center. He's more than a physician to Daya, and I'm told they often discuss various aspects of medicine in the UK and Canada.
Thank you very much. I'd like really to say I'm deeply honored to be here. I didn't have any great research stories to tell you. I love Daya. It's very simple. I love Daya. I was introduced to Daya by Shri, and I have to thank Shri for giving Daya a universe that he could be so happy and so at peace with himself in. Because he had a warm and loving household which made the last years of his life amazing and wonderful. I got to know Daya as a physician, so I'm really here as well to admit failure, because to appear as a physician at a celebration like this is quite depressing. But in some ways it isn't, because we just heard a bit why. I treated him with metformin, and together we would talk for ages about how metformin was helping him. And I'm a long-standing believer in the particular actions of this drug, and Daya's thought processes were always 100 times better than mine, and was able to pick on the weaknesses in my arguments, and I was treating him, and to expose areas of ignorance, which in my case were plentiful. And what is wonderful is, you just heard this drug, which is 100 years old, is now the source of inspiration for research all over the world. Now, I'm about to become 70, and I'm launching 3 projects on this in the next 3 months, the use in the treatment of malignancy. So Daya was a motivator to make me think, and I think that was what he did all the time, made people think. I have to say that people have talked a lot about his broad spread. He was a universal man. He thought with equal accuracy and equal conviction about everything. The fact that I'd once been a member of the Socialist Party of Great Britain, brackets Marxist-Leninist, brackets Albanian, close brackets, was to him flattering. To many of my colleagues, it would have been instantaneous disaster. And as it was in my case, because I was a refugee from Mrs. Thatcher. But because of my refugee status, I was able to meet Shri, I was able to meet Daya's amazing family, and was able to have, in the disguise of clinical discussions, long, explosive journeys around the world of thought. And Daya's journey around the world of thought was unbelievable. He knew everything. He was a walking encyclopedia of morals. He was a walking encyclopedia of science. He was a walking encyclopedia of history. And his last books on medicine and on ethics are staggering in their complexity. And actually, because of this, and because of what we're seeing here today and the impact, Daya isn't dead. Daya is left inside all of us. Daya left a mark, it's obvious, on all of us, intellectually, physically, emotionally, and historically. We will never forget him, and our children won't forget him, and our grandchildren won't forget him, because I talk about him to my children and my friends. And the one thing we agreed on, as he covered the world of politics, Bhopal, pharmacology, morality, and everything that he touched, he turned to positive, active productivity. There was one thing we both agreed on, that even though he was Indian, his soul was Baconian. He was a follower of Francis Bacon in everything except signed-up belief. And I shall end with some quotes from The New Atlantis. I have written lots of stuff, I'm not going to say it all. The New Atlantis was probably one of the first science fiction books written in 1623 and published in 1627, and I'm very lucky I have a first edition. And in this, a typical space traveler at the time is shipwrecked on an island off South America and meets a new civilization. And finally, they're allowed to meet a representative of the House of Solomon. And the House of Solomon tells them their purpose in life, and this was Daya's purpose in life. But you see, we maintain a trade not for gold, silver, or jewels, nor for silks, nor for spices, nor for any other commodity of matter, but only for God's first creature, which was light. To have light, I say, of the growth of all parts of the world. That was Daya. He was a light. He lit the world for all of us in different ways, by touching all of us in different ways. His thoughts, his obsessive modesty, his incredible imagination were a lesson to all of us. And to me, that still lives. And I'm deeply honored that I've been able to share a part of it. Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you, Dr. Morris. Daya had this wonderful hybrid quality of unpretentious confidence. Some have already addressed that. But he'd often express it with this real dry sense of humor. I remember once we were planning a demonstration, and I rushed to Daya's lab, and he had just come out of his single lecture of the semester to, I think it was third-year medical students. And so before we got into the planning of it all, I asked him, well, how did it go? And Daya shrugged his shoulders up. I don't know. For some reason, they stood up and applauded. I would now invite Michel Lambert to say a few words. He is the Director of Alternatives, an international NGO. Daya was on its board of directors when Centre d'études des ressources sur l'Asie du Sud was part of Alternatives, and even after he continued very much to support Alternatives 1 all of the years following that. Michel Lambert.
Alors bonjour, on m'a demandé de vous parler français. Je pense que c'est peut-être un dernier clin d'œil à Daya, parce que je lui ai quand même souvent fait un petit reproche à ce niveau-là. Tout petit. Enfin, je voudrais remercier vraiment les Shri, la famille, d'avoir pensé de nous inviter pour avoir l'opportunité de saluer l'implication de Daya Varma dans la création de l'organisation que je dirige maintenant, une organisation de solidarité internationale qui vise essentiellement donc à lier des mouvements sociaux d'ici, des mouvements sociaux d'ailleurs dans leur travail, dans leur lutte. Et on l'a mentionné dans la présentation, Daya Varma était le premier président fondateur de l'organisation, précurseur aussi parce qu'il a invité une co-présidente, on voit ça dans les partis politiques maintenant, c'est la mode, deux présidents. Et il nous a accompagnés pendant de nombreuses années. On a fêté cette année le 20e anniversaire de l'organisation. Malheureusement, d'ailleurs, pas pu venir, mais c'est vraiment grâce à son implication précurseur, visionnaire, qu'on a pu se rendre où on est là. J'ai connu d'ailleurs en 1992 ou 13, j'étais à peu de choses près un enfant politique à ce moment-là. Et malgré ça, j'ai eu l'opportunité quand même beaucoup de travailler avec lui beaucoup de temps qui est venu passer dans mon bureau pour m'expliquer des choses que je n'arrivais pas à comprendre. Et ce que je retiens, en fait, une des dernières scènes que je retiens de lui, c'était il n'y a pas tellement longtemps, quand finalement le poste que j'occupe maintenant s'est libéré. Et il y avait eu, quelques tiraillages peut-être entre le CERAS et Alternative, et Daya est venu me voir. Il me dit, peut-être que tu devrais devenir le directeur général, comme ça on reviendrait. Ça me fait beaucoup plaisir. Et finalement, j'ai fait ça. Donc, merci, Daya.
Merci beaucoup, Michel. I would like to now read another tribute that we received from Baldev Rajnaya, who was a professor of political science at McGill University. And he addresses this to Shri and to all of us. On the eve of the celebration of Daya Varma's life, I want to express my feelings of good fortune to have known Daya for several decades. I cherish our long conversations in Westmount Park from time to time, and the opportunity he gave me to read over his book manuscripts before their publication and to share his thinking. His commitment to science and human causes was always an inspiration. He was truly a great man, generous in his relationships with friends, and strong in his convictions. I'm sorry that I won't be able to be present at the event because 5 years ago my wife and I moved out of Montreal. And I would just add, when I was a graduate student, I didn't take Dr. Naya's course, but I did audit it. And I think these kind of expressions from someone who, on the ideological spectrum, was quite far from Daya. And yet, nonetheless, he was able to engender this incredible warmth and feeling even from those who disagreed with him politically, respected his work, his vision, and his values, and what motivated him. I would now invite Alia Varma. Alia is Daya's youngest granddaughter, daughter of Rahul and Dipti. She's 17 and spent last Christmas with her grandfather in St. John's. Alia.
Hi, my name is Alia and I'm Papa's youngest granddaughter. I was going to speak about what an amazing man my grandfather is. However, whoever has met him already knows that. So I will share some moments of him with you, moments that have impacted me in many ways in my 17 years. My early memories are those of having regular breakfasts, lunches, and dinners at Shri and Papa's house on the weekends. I often stayed with them over the weekend in their Kensington house, and we used to go for long walks on a mountain with their dog Mischief. During meals, everyone talked of all kinds of things. There were always many people in their house, and I got introduced to many, many people over the years and to a variety of topics over their dining table. When Papa and Shri moved to St. John's, I was just starting my teen years. During one of Papa's visits to Montreal, Papa found me trying to convince my mom to buy me some teen fiction novels, and my mom was not really keen. Papa took the list out of my hands and got me all the novels. Upon his return, he also handed me one extra book, titled Galileo's Daughter. His explanation to this was fairly simple. No matter what, everyone should read what they want. However, there should always be a book that makes you dig beyond the surface. I ended up liking Galileo's Daughter much more than the other novels. Throughout his life, he instilled the joy of reading through me and people he met. On the morning of my 16th birthday, my mom gifted me with an album filled with letters from my grandparents and other relatives. The first letter was Papa's. As I read the letter, I realized what he went through as a child and an adult to gain his education. He had studied in a small village in India and used to walk several kilometers to get to school. At that time, I realized that Papa knew everything about my education. However, I had never really asked him about his. The letter was a detailed one, explaining his journey from his village, primary school to middle school, which was several kilometers away from his own village. One of the several paragraphs in this letter reads, "My high school was very different from yours. There was no electricity in the school. There used to be a panka, a fan which is about 2 by 8 feet, with stiff cloth attached to a wooden frame, to deal with the hot weather. The pankas were connected to a long pole which was held by the panka coolie, who sat in the back of the class and pulled it back and forth to create air movement and relieve the heat." He continued further, "My high school was very different from yours. There were no girls in my school, and there was no formal dress. In the entire school, there was only one teacher who wore pants. Pajamas and dhotis were the norm." He told me how for high school he went from the village to a city that was almost 25 kilometers away from his home. Here he shared a room with a relative. Since that day, I realized that Papa would be able to answer many of my questions from my own academic life. And we engaged in many discussions after that about social science and pure and applied science, as I was finally trying to decide the field in which I wanted to pursue. Papa was very knowledgeable, and he guided me and showed me the differences in both these fields. The one thing he mentioned that struck with me, that was, whoever who had to go into social sciences must always stay informed with current events and read a lot. Papa was an ardent reader, and he instilled this habit in me as well. He was very instrumental in helping me choose my stream of education, amongst many others. My grandfather taught me a lot, and I will forever cherish him, and I am glad we spent time with him in Montreal and St. John's. He will continue to live with my family in my memories and in my heart always. Thank you.
Thank you, Ali. Feroz Mehdi works for Alternatives. He and I have worked together on many social causes. He'll be reading a poem by Fez.
I will be reading a poem in Urdu, which is not, I have not chosen Fez, and there's a reason for that. I chose a poem by Ali Sardar Jafri, who was one of the founders of a great political cultural movement in India called the Progressive Writers Association, formed in mid-1930s. Last time I read this poem was to Daya last year in July when I visited him. In fact, each time, I think most of the time when we spoke or we met, he always asked me to recite one poem or the other. This poem is by Ali Sardar Jafri, and it's called My Journey, and I'll read this in Urdu. The gist is, it's about death and life. Like the poet is saying that one day I'll be no more, but then again, I will come back, and you will hear me speaking from the children's mouths and hear me singing from the birds' mouths. And like these leaves come back in the spring, because death will make me eternal. मेरा सफ़र, फिर एक दिन ऐसा आएगा, आँखों के दिए बुझ जाएंगे. फिर एक दिन ऐसा आएगा, आँखों के दिए बुझ जाएंगे, हाथों के कमल कुमलाएंगे, और बरगे ज़बां से नुत्को सदा की हर तितली बुझ जाएगी. एक काले समंदर की तह में कलियों की तरह से खिलती हुई, फूलों की तरह से हंसती हुई सारी शक्लें खो जाएंगी. खून की गर्दिश, दिल की धड़कन, सब रागनियाँ सो जाएंगी, और नीली फ़ज़ा की मखमल पर हंसती हुई हीरे की ये कनी, ये मेरी जन्नत, मेरी ज़मीन. इसकी सुबह, इसकी शामें बेजाने हुए, बेसमझे हुए एक मुश्ते गुबारे इंसान पर शबनम की तरह रो जाएंगी. हर चीज़ भुला दी जाएगी, यादों के हसी बुतखाने से हर चीज़ उठा दी जाएगी. फिर कोई नहीं ये पूछेगा सरदार कहाँ है महफिल में. लेकिन मैं यहाँ फिर आऊँगा, लेकिन मैं यहाँ फिर आऊँगा, बच्चों के दहन से बोलूँगा, चिड़ियों की ज़बान से गाऊँगा. जब बीज हंसेंगे धरती में और कोपलें अपनी उंगली से मट्टी की तहों को छेड़ेंगी, मैं पत्ती पत्ती, कली कली अपनी आंखें फिर खोलूँगा. सरसब्ज़ हथेली पर लेकर शबनम के कतरे तोलूँगा. मैं रंग हिना, आहंग गज़ल, अंदाज़े सुखन बन जाऊँगा. रुखसारे उरूसे नौ की तरह हर आंचल से छन जाऊँगा. जाड़ों की हवाएं दामन में जब फसलें ख़िज़ां को लाएंगी, रहरों के जवां कदमों के तले सूखे हुए पत्तों से मेरे हंसने की सदाएं आएंगी. धरती की सुनहरी सब नदियाँ आकाश की नीली सब झीलें हस्ती से मेरी भर जाएंगी और सारा ज़माना देखेगा हर किस्सा मेरा अफसाना है, हर आशिक है सरदार यहाँ, हर माशूका सुल्ताना है। मैं एक गुरेज़ा लम्हा हूँ अय्याम के अफसूं खाने में, मैं एक तड़पता कतरा हूँ मसरूफ़ सफ़र जो रहता है माजी की सुराही के दिल से मुस्तक़बिल के पैमाने में। मैं सोता हूँ और जागता हूँ, मैं सोता हूँ और जागता हूँ और जाग के फिर सो जाता हूँ, सदियों का पुराना खेल हूँ मैं मर के अमर हो जाता हूँ।
Thank you for this. Some of you know that Daya was a strict vegetarian convert. And before he moved to St. John's, despite his dietary restrictions, he always managed to come to my annual Schwartz's smoked meat Super Bowl party. So we're talking about 25, 26 years in a row. And Daya would sit there and nibble on a vegetarian side dish. And despite not knowing very much about football, he would always confidently announce his prediction of who's going to win by what score. Now, of course, he'd base his homespun analysis totally on the political reputation of the city. How progressive the fans were supposed to be. And so on Daya's scorecard, the Dallas Cowboys never had a chance. Not to stereotype. I would now welcome Dolores Chu. Dolores is a professor at Marianopolis College. She joined the Indian Peoples Association in North America, one of the organizations that Daya helped co-found with Hari Sharma and others. She joined as a youngster in 1976 and remained an activist, has remained an activist on many progressive fronts. She has served as president and other executive positions of the South Asian Women's Community Center and has worked with many other progressive organizations in the city, including the South Asia Research and Resource Center. Dolores.
Thank you, Steve. So as Steve has already said, I have known Daya since 1976, and as you've already heard from many people here, Daya was elemental in who I am now and what I have been doing since that time. But what I'm going to share with you is less of my personal connection and tribute, because some of us have already had the privilege of doing that through the Insaf bulletin that Daya and Vinod had run for all these years, and you can find many amazing memories that many of us have already shared. So here I'm going to talk about Daya's connection to two organizations that are very much part of the Montreal scene, the South Asian Women's Community Center and the South Asia Research Center. It's wonderful being here today. Daya's passing has brought together many people from near and far, and there are many others who are not here, not able to be here today, but are with us in spirit. And this in itself is a tremendous tribute and recognition of how important and loved Daya was, politically, personally, and academically, that he could count all of us from different geographic spaces and different walks of life and different time periods, that he could count all of us among his friends, comrades, and colleagues. So I was asked to say a few words about Daya and SOC, the South Asian Women's Community Center, and also Daya and SERAS, the South Asia Center, which is a forum on South Asia in Montreal dedicated to public education and promotion of peace, secularism, and democratic development in South Asia. To my fellow SOC and SERAS members, and I can see many of us here in the room present today, I want to apologize for not finalizing what I would say
in time to circulate it to you for your valuable input and comments. Though I hope my words reflect to some extent our common experience and memories of Daya. SOC, the South Asian Women's Community Center, was officially launched in 1981. Some of us had identified a need for an organization for South Asian women and their families in Montreal, since there was nothing like this in Montreal at the time, and we set about making it happen. SOC was founded on principles of feminism and solidarity. Daya, though not directly involved in the setting up of SOC, also recognized this need as well, and was one of our staunchest supporters always.
He became an associate member for life, and that's simply because being a man, he could not become a full member, but he was very much a part of SOC. Daya attended our public events, conferences, celebrations, picnics, and our famous year-end parties. He also came to our annual general meetings, and at all events, he always rolled up his sleeves and got to work before the event, fetching, carrying large pots of food, setting up. Afterwards, he remained for the cleanup, walking through a venue, garbage bag in hand, folding tables and stacking chairs. Daya was a great role model for other men, as a man of stature, well respected in the community, an eminent scientist. By doing, he challenged the public-private divide and notions of dichotomized gender roles. Daya knew about patriarchy and how it can manifest in different contexts, and he never discriminated along gender lines. He spoke with admiration of his mother, a village woman who was strong, clever, and feisty. From all accounts, she was amazing. And though I never spoke about this with Daya, I assume he got some of his feminism from her. At SOC, a treasured memory we have of Daya is very telling of his support and commitment to us. Over the years, in order to fundraise, we organized bazaars and then garage sales. Our first garage sale was held in Shree's backyard on Grand Boulevard, and Daya generously donated many of his shirts, which were in perfect condition. He donated them for the cause. A lot of teamwork went into preparation for the sale, pricing, sorting, washing donated clothes, and ironing them. Not surprisingly, on the day of the sale, Daya was there as a volunteer. But what did surprise us was that he turned out to be one of our best customers, buying back all the shirts he had donated. And when we exclaimed, "But Daya, you gave us those shirts and now you're buying them back," he just chuckled and flashed us one of his brilliant smiles. At times, there might have been some tensions, to some extent generational, but also, I believe, because of some traditional views on the left with regard to gender, because Daya was also always open to challenges and reconceptualizing, as we've already heard this morning. Things got resolved through discussion together. CERAS, as you've already heard, is the South Asia Forum in Montreal. It was founded at a time of heightened communalization of politics in India, which culminated at that time in the destruction of the Babri Mosque. Some of us involved in CERAS had, with Daya, as you've already heard, been a part of the Indian People's Association in North America, IPANA. Unlike IPANA, however, which was India-focused, CERAS had an explicitly South Asia focus, which reflected both the history and current realities of the region. That in order to have peace, secularism, and democratic development in the region, it was important for all the countries to work together, that war and conflict did nothing to improve the lives of the common people. Daya, as many of you already know, was instrumental in the establishment of CERAS and was the driving force behind it. And it is his pan-South Asian vision that served as its foundation. Daya's life experience, being born and growing up in undivided India, being active in left politics for equality and justice for all, in his student days there and later in the diaspora, being involved in struggles against racism, for democracy in India and in third world solidarity and against imperialism, and his involvement in Indo-Pakistan peace initiatives, Daya's life experience ensured that the political vision of Saras was realistic, yet comprehensive and inspired. Always looking for new and innovative ways to mobilize people, to educate, inform, and take action, under Daya's watch, Saras organized some landmark conferences on Pakistan and Bangladesh in Montreal, bringing together people from the diaspora and the subcontinent. The founding conference of INSAF, the International South Asia Forum, was also organized in Montreal in 1999 under the auspices of Saras. In the years that followed, to advance the work of Saras, Daya proposed regular informal discussion forums be held to educate and inform on issues of importance. They were very successful. There was the Saras Bulletin, again initiated by Daya. And Daya also enthusiastically supported initiatives by fellow members. To give an example, in the wake of the horrendous Staines murder in Orissa, to lodge our protest and express our solidarity with Christians in India, on Good Friday of that year, some of us suggested that Saras issue a call for a day of fasting and reflection. Daya was all for it. We spent the day reading poetry, singing songs, and having theatre performances. It was moving and inspiring. We got a very positive response, not just in Montreal, but from other parts of Canada, the USA, and elsewhere. Even as he grew older, Daya didn't falter. On some of the most bitterly cold days in Montreal, Daya, often with his beloved Mischief, was out with the rest of us with the Saras banner, protesting imperialist attacks in the post-9/11 world. Because of Daya, Saras came to be respected and have stature in the community. He was able to bring on board individuals from the various South Asian communities in the city who were respected and influential in their communities, contributing to Saras' success in developing South Asian solidarity. And because of Daya, Saras came to be known and respected, not just in Montreal and Canada, but also in South Asia and internationally as well. Daya always encouraged younger members to take an active role, and he never pulled rank. We benefited so much from Daya's guidance, knowledge, experience, and expertise. He came from a generation that had lived under colonialism, who dreamed of a better India after independence. He saw many struggles, many bitter splits and divisions in the left, the repeated betrayal of the promise of post-independent democratic India, wars again across post-colonial borders between people who had once been neighbors. And from all this, he continued to observe, question, and draw lessons, and he never gave up. Daya was a builder, visionary, and a revolutionary, and a radical in the truest sense of the word, going to the root. For him, revolution was not simply rhetoric. He was a brilliant thinker and ideologue, but he was also very practical. He was a man of great conviction and passion, kind, compassionate, generous. Daya was a towering figure in the South Asian diaspora and in the subcontinent, especially among progressives. We mourn his passing and miss not having his counsel in these dark days and times of great challenge in Canada, in India, South Asia, and the world. But as Brecht wrote, in the dark times, will there also be singing? And the response comes back, yes, there will also be singing about the dark times. Daya Varma, friend, mentor, comrade, may those of us who survive you keep the song going so we can make India, South Asia, and the world the place you wanted it to be. And keeping in mind what happened on the streets of Montreal last evening, through the mists of that tear gas, we will stand together and say, Inqilab Zindabad, long live revolution.
Thank you, Dolores. T.K. Raghunathan, popularly known as Raghu, worked as an aerospace engineer at Bombardier. And for many years, he has served on the executive of the Kabir Center for Art and Culture, currently as its president. Raghu.
Good morning, friends. As you have heard, my name is Raghu. Hita and I have been friends of Sri and Daya for over 26 years now. Unlike most of you who knew Daya since the 70s and 80s, we happened to meet Daya sometime in 1989, just after we had immigrated from Canada, and I was looking for a job in Montreal. So I'm probably less qualified to talk about him than many of you who rubbed shoulders with him in his activist life or in his professional life. If Daya was an army general, and most of you are officers and soldiers who fought many a battle with him, I'm like his civilian neighbor, keeping an eye only on his non-combatant activities. Daya, as the name implies, was a man of great compassion. And whatever he did without ado. Thus it was that when I found my first Canadian job in Montreal in 1990 and moved in from Toronto, he had already thought about what Hita would do and where we would live. I think Daya pointed Hita in the direction of a job at SOC, and he offered his condo on St. Jacques Street for us to live. Hita, as it happened, found a job herself at McGill, but we lived for a couple of years in Daya's condo before we moved to West Island. Daya was a modest man. This modesty showed up in many ways. When he spoke, it was in a simple language. When he welcomed you, it was with a gracious smile rather than the use of flowery language. And when he discussed an issue with you, it was with the deepest respect for your point of view. Daya's humility and modesty concealed a razor-sharp intellect. He had an uncanny ability to see the bigger picture in any situation, political, social, economic, or cultural. He was constantly analyzing the evolution in any field and used his observations to verify his own beliefs. He was the biggest critic of his own beliefs, whether it be the relevance of communism, Marxism, Leninism to the modern day politics, whether it be the belief system that animals have no souls, whether it be the role of activism in society and how it has become for some in this world a vocation instead of being the result of personal convictions. Daya never stopped analyzing, questioning, and modifying his own beliefs. Daya fought for justice, peace, equality, and secularism throughout his life. He was a ceaseless organizer. And so it was that he was instrumental in creating Kabir Center. I remember like it was yesterday, some 12 years ago, he met a few of us one afternoon after incorporating the center, talked to us about it, and then said, Biren, you be the president, Raghu, you be the secretary. Frankly, neither Biren nor me had any experience in running a non-profit cultural organization and had no qualification except for a vague appreciation, vague love of good music. But credit be to Daya, like all great visionaries and great leaders, he knew that somehow his nominees will rise to the occasion. You know, good leaders, they say, are those who make you believe in them, but great leaders are those who make you believe in yourself, and that's what Daya did. Daya did not want to mix up his activist tendencies with the administration of Kabir Center, and so he stood far back and kept encouraging us in what he did. Peace between India and Pakistan was close to his heart. And so whenever something happened in the cultural field, which was significant in this direction, he did not hesitate to spread it far and wide. When in 2007, the Qawwal's Farid Ayaz Ensemble, after the concert at Kabir Center, were invited to the Hindu temple at DDO and sang there. Daya asked me to write an article about it and got it published in Insaf Bulletin. As you all know, he himself traveled to Kashmir and to Pakistan in his continuous efforts to understand the situation at a personal level so that he could promote the peace process more effectively. Most of his messages to me were short and thought-provoking, but there were exceptions. He had his own perceptive take on many situations. When we showed the film Khamosh Pani at Kabir Center, he sent us a lengthy note on why Garam Hawa was a much better film, as it dealt with the fate of millions of Indian Muslims, whereas Khamosh Pani, for him, was mere fiction. He wrote, Zia was politically toppled by Pakistan's women when Iqbal Bano sang Face Ahmed Face verse, Dekhenge, Hum Dekhenge, at a mammoth gathering in Lahore. The entire crowd rose on their feet. That the director of the film Khamosh Pani ignores this development as a turning point, instead makes the year 2000 as a landmark. That was his opinion. Another opinion, which was quite uncommon, was when Rohinton Mistry wrote about the burning of his book, Such a Long Journey, in Mumbai. Daya wrote in Globe and Mail, the issue is not the burning of Mr. Mistry's book or threat to his life, but it's about the destruction of the democratic fabric of India. Such was Daya's overall perception of the situation. He had many interesting one-liners summarizing his thought process. One of them, which arrived in his cryptic email addressed to Biren and me in 2008, was, if there is war between Pakistan and India, it is because of US intervention, and if there isn't, it is despite it. Excuse me? Another one was, Mischief, his dog, died this morning. Him, he knew me most. Most of us have heard that what a good bridge player Daya was, and how he was sought after by Bridge Club in St. John's until his last days. What you may not know is that Daya was also an excellent Scrabble player. Him and me, having spent many afternoons in his Kensington house and even at our house in West Island, matching our wits and drinking his coffee. I have no hesitation in admiring in front of all of you, in admitting in front of all of you, that at the very beginning his modesty and hesitant speech made me underestimate his talent, but it did not take very long for me to realize that he was no ordinary player. One could occasionally make fun of him because he made words, the meaning of which he did not care to remember. But such weaknesses made it easier for us to accept our losses, which occurred a little more frequently than we would have liked. When I think of many friendships I've had in my life, it seems to me that good friends, however far away and however out of touch they have been, tend to leave a smile on your face when you think of them. So it is with Daya. We shall always remember you with a smile. We shall always remember you for your uncompromising intellect, for your unpredictable wit, for your utter humility, and for your compassion for the society around you and far away from you. We will certainly miss you there, but we should also rejoice that you are present in our lives. Thank you and farewell.
Thank you, Rahul. Rahul Varma is Daya's eldest son. He is a well-known playwright in Montreal, the artistic director of Tishri Dunia Theatre Company, founded 35 years ago. He's written many plays, but his highly acclaimed play, Bhopal, has been produced in several languages in Canada and India. Rahul?
This will be I need a moment. My father was a brilliant scientist with over 225 publications, 2 feature-length books, a boundless stream of articles, essays, chapters, a staunch secularist, a socialist. Featured subject in world-class documentaries, founder or initiator of many social justice organizations. He was one-of-a-kind activist who combined science, politics, human rights, envisioning a society built upon the foundation of peace, equality, and justice. What can I say about his illustrious political life that wouldn't be said by comrades, friends, and admirers? So I would say a few of those aspects of his life that are less known or unknown. His eldest son, was born in 1952. My sister Roli was born in 1955, and my brother Rohit was born in 1960. My father left India in 1959. We were raised by my mother alone, despite having a family, and that was not an effect of immigration. Who made my father who he became was my grandfather, who in absence of my father was my psychological father, and my grandmother, who as the most loving woman I have ever known was my additional mother. I pay homage to my father in memory of my exemplary grandparents my father rarely talked about. I pay homage to my father to pay homage to my grandparents and what they built for us to keep and maintain our heritage. My father was born in a peasant family in a village called Neiges, India. He was the only son among 3 surviving siblings. My grandfather was a peasant as well as a primary school teacher, popularly known as Munshi Baba. He wanted his children to have more education than he himself had had, and my father did not disappoint. Starting at one-room primary school in his village, he immigrated to progressively bigger cities for his secondary, post-secondary, and graduate education. My grandfather had desired his sons and daughters to remain attached to the family and stay within the sight of the family home, which they were born in. My father's academic accomplishments and his desire for excellence, however, took him away from the family, the village, and eventually the country he was born in. Even though my father spent most of his life in Canada, visiting village infrequently and for a very short duration, so often his travel time used to be longer than his stay in the village, much of his belief system was shaped from his days in Neiges, the village. Those days saw him being raised in a peasant family, watching his mother and father breaking their backs to reclaim family land from the moneylenders and experiencing financial hardship in getting educated. As a boy, he lived in a mud house with dirt floor. He traveled 8 kilometers to attend school, and he did his homework while returning home on a bullock cart. My grandfather carried 40 kilograms of sack of grain on his head and walked 30 kilometers distance on foot because he could not afford a bus ticket, so that my father had something to eat while away from home for education. On his part, my father worked as a servant to pay for his lodging and slept in a donated space, a space donated to him by a fellow student. He was married at a very young age, a union that would end in divorce decades later, and had children also at a very young age, from whom he would be separated during the most of their formative years. Amid all this, he pursued his father's dream, going to receive MBBS and MD degree with honors from a prestigious King George Medical College in Lucknow, coming to Canada in 1959 and receiving his PhD in pharmacology from McGill University in 1961. But in spite of the academic accomplishments, departure from his birthplace, divided and separated family, immigration to Canada, much of his wisdom, his consciousness, his belief system came from what he had observed, learned, and experienced as a young boy growing in his village. He was very sensitive to human conditions, but utterly unsentimental about his own. He seldom talked about his parents' hardship publicly, a question that he could never answer himself. In his lifetime, he went from being a poor village boy to a distinguished student, to a brilliant scientist, to a concerned intellectual, to a tireless activist, to an elder statesman who inspired young and old. For him, there was no separation between the professional success and political consciousness. Despite the divided family, despite separation, he made great many sacrifices for all of us. I am who I am because he brought me here at very big personal cost. And that's true for rest of my siblings also. He brought his immediate family to Canada in 1975-76. Having been apart from him all my growing up years and joining him as an adult, I wasn't only united with a separated father, but also with a father who was an intellectual activist mobilizing support against suppression of democracy, working on issues such as Bhopal disaster, mass violence against Dalits, Muslims, Sikhs, Adivasis, Christians, human rights and other issues. He held dear the principle, land to the tiller. My father was a voice of wisdom behind many of my plays that I wrote. He was the source of the wisest political one-liners I have heard no better one-liners than from him. I've explored many of his one-liners in a play I have written. Somebody mentioned that he, in science, used to raise most questions and move on. That's what he did to me. He would give a question, I would explore in a play, and he was out. And literally any play that I have written is part of some one-liner he had given me. Bhopal, my fictional play based on the industrial disaster at the Union Carbide factory, derived its premise from my father's wisdom. For him, 1984 was a very special year, very dark year, because it was marked by state-sponsored violence against Sikhs and the world's worst industrial disaster at the Union Carbide factory in Bhopal. When Union Carbide plant exploded, killing over 2,500 people overnight, and while company bosses, corporate lobbyists, and media were busy establishing whose fault it is, my father flew to India and started collecting data from the survivors and victims, data that would be later become a subject of his research and eventually potential evidence against the corporation. He told me the impact of the poison gas MIC would haunt not only the present, but the generations to come. He told me that those not yet born at the time of the explosion would carry the devastating effect of the MIC, a fact that was kept hidden as a trade secret. And he was not only saying all those things, he was a true activist. At one time, in a toxicology conference, he confronted Hans Weil, the infamous doctor who said that the methyl isocyanide will roll out of the eyes of the patients. My father not only told the scientific community that this was a scientific hearsay, he walked up to Hans Meyer and told him never go to India ever again. That a mice will haunt the generations yet to be born became the distinct idea of the play that premiered in 2001, which was subsequently published, translated and produced in French, Hindi and Punjabi. And Dr. Sonia Labonte, a character in the play, was inspired and informed by my father's work, truly. And as I talk to you, this play is part of an anthology of the South Asian Canadian plays, and it is being dedicated to my father for what he's done. We are very proud to be in a family where we have dedicated good amount of our energy and intellect on disaster in Bhopal. He introduced me to Dipti and wanted us to get married, which we did. To impress Dipti, I'm married because it was his idea and I honor, and I'm very happily married, and I thank him for introducing me to Dipti. But he did something to him. He wanted Dipti to be impressed by me. So he sent a letter to her, and in that he wrote some of my good qualities. And this is what he wrote. He is healthy, non-smoker, owns a car but rides a bicycle, against caste system, supports women's movement, non-religious, non-chauvinist, non-traditional, and non-vegetarian. So that's the kind of a father. This is how he was selling me to her. He was very proud of his grandchildren. If anyone ever said, you have 4 grandchildren, he corrected them by saying, no, 4 granddaughters. He loved his granddaughters. He loved children. But he lived most of his life away from them, preventing him from being the father he may have been wanted to be. But he made it up for this by loving his grandchildren and children in general. He retired as a full-time professor from McGill in 2007. But he did not retire from his retirement. He wrote 2 books on medicine and society and wanted to write a 3rd one. And the title was going to be Poverty, a Curable Disease. But in the years leading up to his death, he battled many ailments, forcing him to retreat to the rest. So instead of embarking on his 3rd book, he ended up writing a chapter, and he rushed this chapter to be published before his death. That is the kind of a man he was. And I'm so lucky to have read that article and partly edited that. His legacy is that he never gave up the hope that a just society is possible. He believed in land to the tiller, a guiding principle that so many of us are inspired to live for. He was a big man in every way. His life is worth celebrating. And it will continue to inspire us. Thank you.
Rahul's theater company, Tisri Dunya, is the most bold political theater company in Canada, which is not surprising, considering who his father was. Daya was very, very proud of the work that Rahul has done. Some of you may also know that Daya was a connoisseur of fine whiskey. Fine aged whiskey. Now, my parents never drank, but my mom, for decades, stored in her closet an unopened bottle of 18-year-old vintage scotch that my folks had received at their wedding in 1941. Whenever I mentioned this to Daya, his eyes would pop open. can't help but laugh thinking about his expressions. When my mom moved in 2003, she had no room for it. She kept it as a memory of their wedding. And so, of course, I promised it to Daya. And, you know, Daya often says, oh, no, it's not necessary. He didn't say that when I offered it to him. So finally, the big day came. And I handed him this ornately shaped bottle of, by then, 90-year-old Scotch. Daya, the devout atheist, held it in both hands like it was the Holy Grail. And off he went. A few days later, I called Daya and said, so, how did it taste? Silence. I heard a whisper, toxic. It seems that my dad had probably opened it for a tiny taste before waxing the cap on the top. And over the decades, it had become toxic. But more than once, Daya and I had a good laugh reminiscing about that irony of life. I would like to invite Rohit Varma, Daya's second son. He is a computer scientist and the proud father of two daughters, Sonia and Sarah, who I think will join him. Rohit.
I'm not a scientist or a revolutionary or anything that you guys are all. I'm just Daya's son from his first marriage. I was going to come here with my sister, but she couldn't make it because she lives far away in Albuquerque and is going through some operation in the kidneys. Just happened a few days ago. I cannot help but feel very envious of all of you who have such wonderful stories and times that you have spent with my father. I wish more than anything that I could stand here and share the same countless stories with him. However, my time with my father was very limited. He left India in 1959 while I was still in my mother's womb. I had very few childhood memories of him. In 1972, he returned back to India. The next 2 years he spent in India were the best years of our lives. We had everything. We had finally, after many years, gotten our father back. In 1975, he brought us to Canada for a better life. But life with him was not what we remembered. Our father was a great man. We knew he was a great man. But that was not what we wanted. We wanted a father. We were unable to pull our father out of a great man. 2 years after that, coming to Canada, we separated. And our time with him grew very scarce. As an adult, I was lucky enough to have him come and stay with me and my family for a few occasions. I cannot speak how well he enjoyed his stay with us, but we really enjoyed him having even come there and stay with us. My father, and now that he's gone, I cannot say that I will ever know him, but I can say that regardless of how well I knew him, I always love him and will always miss him. Thank you.
Thank you, Rohit. Rana Bose is an engineer who worked with Daya in Daya's lab when he first moved to to Canada in 1977. Rana moved here from Pakistan. He's a playwright and a novelist who founded Montreal Sarai magazine in the mid-1980s. Rana?
Just say I moved here from Pakistan.
Please go ahead.
Okay. Practically all the things that I wanted to say have been said, so I'm kind of reduced what I had to say. Somebody mentioned, I think it was David Morris, that Daya is not dead. But actually, this is the end of an era. The way it works is that, you know, between 1959 and 2015, Daya was instrumental in, that's how I knew Daya, the first day I met him, right there on the screen. So Daya, if you're an accountant, you know, and thank God I'm not, you make a balance sheet about you know, your assets and your liabilities, or your income and your expenses. And Daya, you know, the reason why I say it's the end of an era is because, you know, you have to take stock of what you've done with your life as somebody associated with Daya. And it's a question of what did you give and what did you take, you know? And if you did a balance sheet of Daya in Canada, on the net asset side, he only gave. He gave, he didn't take. So it's kind of simplistic, so as to say he was a complicated guy. But I'll share with you, I know many of you shared some of his quotes, so I'll do the same. He'd say stuff like, listen, it's a very good idea, but it also is a very bad idea. Or you say something like, I want you to do two things, but first don't do anything. So, you know, at another level, we went to see Daya 19 days before he passed on. And both him and Sri had, we were planning to go at the end of April, and he said, no, you better come now. So we went to see him, and So what we did was we were going to cook a lot of food and leave it for Shri and Daya. So, you know, we knew many family members and friends were coming over, so that was our intention. So we cooked some meat. And so one morning, Daya said, well, Shri had told me before that Daya doesn't eat meat anymore. So Daya told me the story. And I want to share this with you about the kind of guy he was. Like somebody mentioned, he went to Kashmir. So Daya was in Kashmir. And, you know, normally people become vegetarians because they've been to a slaughterhouse or have seen blood or something like that. But Daya said that when he went to Kashmir, he sensed a certain violence in the air. He sensed that there were these sandbagged police encampments, military patrols, posses everywhere, and the people were sort of cowering, hiding their faces, walking away. He sensed that atmosphere, and he told me, after that, I came back, and I wouldn't eat meat anymore. Now, you know, people may feel, what is the connection? But he sensed the structural violence in the society there so intensely that that's how his body reacted. That's the kind of guy, you know, Daya was. I'm going to read you a poem I've written for him. Incidentally, I stood on the same spot exactly here some 12 years ago and read a poem for my mother. So the poem that I've written has a lot of dates that not necessarily I have been involved with Daya in, but those dates reflect the associations Daya has had with his own existence and his own activism. In the dour evenings left behind since 1857, when chrome-lined clouds hung like corpses with injured feelings, soul survivors rode back on horses with chopped wings. The brute calm of colonies, fed by rumors of Greece, lay fetid and divided. On the railroad lines to Comilla and Lahore, from 42 to 47, to quit or not to quit was the question to behold. On the rooftops huddled together with stencils descending down drain pipes of tall academic buildings, like roots, like war wounds penetrating the tiller's soil in 1967. In genocidal swamps in 71, where healing had no meaning, where polemics went absurd, where green triumphed over crimson and gave birth to a putrid saffron. And the lapping sea sounds came and went, cascading into the cauldron of a fermenting fire, of juvenile exuberance on a soulless beach where dreams and wishes lay jackknifed after decades and eons of hoping and wishing. Dismantled and imprisoned of banned thoughts in 75, slide guitar strains of turn, 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 and the words of Jose, yo soy un hombre sincero, de donde crece la palma. Searching for some sunlight through the emergency mess, looking past the obvious oblong and the square. Like torrents of rain rushing side by side along a broad river until the mind splits open, wet and damaged, to reveal a landscape with a hard sun that lies crouched on the corner in a basement of operations, in a fetal ambush position, waiting anxiously to hear the agony of the last poets waving from the last train leaving. Tempest times, running rivers, rock-strewn debris, metal isocyanate leaking through rocks, and merciless trees. Clawing the soil, riding on dreams as July bleeds into August, December 84 and 2002, the pogroms continue. December 84 and 2002, the pogroms continue. I can remember, like magazine pages flipping in the wind, I remember those tempest times we lay tempered by a tempest in the cold of an avenue basement where the light from a TV kept him sleepy, as magazines and papers were cut and pasted on light boards long. Arey, make some coffee, yaar. At 2 in the AM suddenly, and the half-asleep son would reply, "Haan, bottle bhi chahiye kya?" Tempered by the tempest, long time gone, pondering over the onrushing torrents, but lying lavish still, in the hush and calm of a twilight time, in the windswept rocky edge of that land to the north. Those who cannot change their minds cannot change anything. Thank you.
Thank you, Rana. I have to apologize. Somehow I had in my mind that when you left India, the plane touched down in Karachi before you arrived in Montreal.
Excuses.
You have to allow at least one gaffe. There's reference to Daya being such an excellent bridge player. I had heard this from the early years when we first met. Never played bridge with Daya, but Shri tells me that that in St. John's, it seemed like Daya's reputation grew far and wide, and that everybody wanted Daya as his partner or her partner. And as you can see, I think by the memorial book, there is a certificate that was awarded to Daya recently by the American Contract Bridge League, which recognizes him as a Golden Age master. I would ask Dr. Vinod Mubai to say a few words. He is a physicist at the VP Brookhaven Laboratories in Long Island, New York. He's a social activist and closely associated with progressive movements in North America. For the past 16 years, he's co-edited with Daya the Bulletin of INSAF, the International South Asia Forum. And I might add, if you want to go to their website, you can see all of the wonderful tributes that have been sent to Daya in their bulletin, which is dedicated to his memory.
Thank you for inviting me. It's a kind of deeply emotional moment because I'm trying to condense 40 years of intense association into a few minutes. And I recall that we first met here in this city in 1975 when we founded the Indian People's Association of North America in Daya's house where he lived at that time. And we have been together ever since in a variety of different causes. When I was first asked to speak, it was kind of as a lament. I was reminded, I'll quote a few Urdu poets that we both loved and shared. In the words of Mirza Ghalib, he said, "Dam liya tha na qayamat ne hanooz, kyun tera waqt safar yaad aaya?" That the moment of shock had not yet passed. Why did I have to recall your life's journey, as it were? But then I thought that this is actually a moment of celebration. It's not, the lament will be felt by those of us who were close in age to him and who shared a lot of similar backgrounds in a way, especially in association with progressive communist leftist movements in India, from where he emerged at a young age, as we recalled in many conversations. So it's more of a celebration as to what he was, and you've heard a lot of that from his academic colleagues, his accomplishments in the field of science, his social activism, his political activism, his wisdom, etc., all of which were really part and parcel of a kind of weekly communication that we had since we've edited this in South Bulletin as co-editors for many years, producing it every month. We had become like the old married couple who complete each other's sentences. Daya would call me up or send me an email with, hey, let's write about this, and he would write like a half a sentence or two. This is what I think. And I would go on and complete his thoughts, and then he would get back, and we worked like that because we both held full-time positions for many years doing our professional work, but we still managed to bring this bulletin out every month in the last week or in the first week of the month for a good long many years. As I said, issue number 157 emerged yesterday and was circulated, and you can go to the website and see it. What I'd like to focus on for the few minutes that I have is some aspects of his life and values and where they emerge from based on the conversations that I had with him over many, many years. One was this value of generosity that you heard about to his immediate family in so many different ways, his children, his friends, despite whatever turmoils people have in their lives and so on. And to make sure that nobody lacked for anything, that he had the ability or he had the wisdom to supply or to make available. There are countless stories, and if you go and read last month's issue of Insaf Bulletin, where we have printed hundreds of tributes to him, you'll find those stories all over the pages. I had the job of editing each one of those for publication, so I became familiar with a panoply of stories that I had never heard before. But where his other values came from, I'd just like to recall a little bit, for just a couple of minutes, that he told me once, and he's written about it too, that his joining the Communist Party in the late 40s or 1950 when he was a student was a seminal moment in his life, and a lot of his values came out of that experience. I'm a little more than a decade younger than him, and I had perhaps similar experiences in the 60s when I went through a similar, and so these days, the communist movement are derided by people who consider themselves postmodernist, or I don't know what the academic jargon is these days, as just a compendium of brutalities of leaders like Stalin, etc. But one has to look at somebody like Daya to recall what some of the values that were given to us, against orthodoxy that all our families were imbued with, against prejudice, keeping an open mind about a lot of things, rationalism, secularism, democracy, all these values came out of that moment. And the best way I can recall them is to recite a few words from the famous poet Faiz, which Feroz unfortunately did not do, He recited Ali Sardar Jafri, who's equally great in that respect. But I will recite and translate. They just came to me. So what did he learn from the communist movement? आजिज़ी सीखी, गरीबों की हिमायत सीखी, यासो हिरमान दुख दर्द के माने सीखे, ज़ेर दस्तों के मुसायब को समझना सीखा, सर्द आहें रुखे ज़र्द के माने सीखे. What does that mean? I learned how to support the strivings of the poor. I learned the meaning of deprivation and pain and grief. I learned what the ashen pallor of faces meant and what cold sighs meant. And then he goes on to say, जब कहीं बैठ के रोते हैं वो बेकस जिनके अश्क आंखों में बिलकते हुए सो जाते हैं, नातवानों के निवालों पे झपड़ते हैं उकाब, बाजू तोले हुए मंडलाते आते हैं, जब कहीं बिकता है बाजार में मजदूर का गोश्त, शाहराहों पे गरीबों का लहू बहता है, आग से सीने में रह रह के उबलती है ना पूछ, मुझको अपने दिल पे काबू ही नहीं रहता है. When the flesh of the workers is sold in the marketplace, when the blood of the poor runs out on the street, then a feeling of anger, a feeling of struggle arises in me, and I just cannot control myself. I think this is where these values came to him from his involvement at an early age. In that moment, we shared these values, and this is why you hear this rich description of all that he was. He did imbibe a lot from his time that he was exposed to, and he's written about it too in various places. I will just close by recalling Lahore. I am a Lahoria, born in Lahore, which is in Pakistan. And we met in Lahore together in 2006 to attend the wedding of the daughter of a dear friend of ours, who Daya also knew, who very unfortunately passed away in Montreal 2 weeks ago, Anwar Pasha. And we met there in Montreal, and we had a great time because it was the first time I had visited my birthplace after almost 60 years. I took my mother there, she was still alive, and we had a tremendous time as she recalled her entire childhood and so forth in the city. And he was one passionately devoted to a future free of conflict for the whole of the region, including the two countries that emerged after independence. And I must say, that struggle is still very much there because the developments have not entirely been good. But it's to people like him that we owe the recognition for what we are, where we are coming from, and what we can hope to become in the future. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Vinod. There are just 3 people who have asked to speak, and I think we're going to have to limit it to that. And I would ask you to please limit comments to 2 minutes. There's a wonderful meal awaiting us. First, Herman Rosenfeld.
Thanks, Steve. I know Daya since the early 1970s, and we were involved in the group that Steve talked about called the Afro-Asia-Latin America People Solidarity Committee. And I remember it was the first space that I learned about international solidarity, not just as a principle, but the idea of struggles in fighting imperialism internationally and fighting struggles in your own country were intimately linked. And it was Daya Varma who taught me that lesson in a particular way. I remember a couple of things about Daya that I never forgot. Number one is that those koans that he asked, those seemingly contradictory comments, well, and then he'd deconstruct them. Well, I remember Steve said, look at his notes. I remember looking at his notes, and there you had, every point he made was a contradiction, and each one gave rise to another contradiction. That's how Daya thought. And over the years, we remained friends, and unfortunately I left Montreal in 1976 to seek my own fortune in the labor movement, and in about 3 or 4 or 5, unfortunately, generations of attempted and failed attempts to build socialist parties and movements within the Canadian working class. I'm still working on my 6th one right now. But Daya always was sympathetic, supportive, but he always had that critical edge around the sureness with a lot of us in which we engage in every one of these enterprises. And that critical edge was not a cynical edge, was a constructive edge, and was always around, always posing questions in a supportive and a solidaristic manner. All throughout Toronto and the rest of Canada, when I did work, when I met people in the South Asian communities among the left, they all knew Daya. And they all asked me about my experiences working, and I was proud of it. And finally, in the last period, I used to get INSAF, and I couldn't wait till every one of the INSAF bulletins came, and I still do. And I remember I would engage with Daya on pieces that he wrote. And it made me think about certain questions that I always wanted to debate with him. And a lot of it would just make me ask him, because, you know, it's hard to debate with Daya to a certain extent, around the questions of the relationship of socialism and development, the question of China, and just how we saw the potential of socialism in Canada. And the very final thing is that I noticed that the very last things he wrote about were constantly challenging the communal violence in India and the importance of fighting that and challenging it. And it was actually very important, and he became very, very important advocate for democratic resolutions of differences and struggles. And quite frankly, it's a very, very important lesson we need today. For me, whenever I do things, one of the voices I hear is Daya's. I can hear his voice, just his mannerisms, the questions he might ask, and I ask myself those questions. And for me, the idea of fundamental change in this country, fighting capitalism, is something that Daya was overwhelmingly associated with, but always the questions about how to do it right. Every time you make a stand or do something, what's this potential, what's that potential? Daya's voice is there, and quite frankly, I find that very, very inspiring, although it is sad to see Daya go. Thank you.
Thank you, Herman. Next, William Deere.
Thank you, Steve. All the other speakers have already stated what a wonderful life Daya led and all the contributions that he made to society. So the only thing I can say is to offer a little bit of my own personal experiences with Daya over the years. I first knew Daya during my student days at McGill in 1969 or 1970. It was definitely in 1970, well, before 1970, because it was before the October crisis. I remember going to his lab at the McGill Medical Building to pick up some stickers, which had the image of the Québécois Patriote and the slogan "Abat le fascisme," which he asked me to put up around the campus. One of his graduate students was arrested under the War Measures Act. Daya was a man of principles, a man of conviction, and a man of determination. He took action when there was injustice. He was a political mentor to me, but more than that, he was a loyal friend. Despite his hard, non-compromising political stance, he was a gentle and sympathetic person who genuinely cared about the plight of people. Daya was a dialectical thinker. He was the only person I know that would apply the dialectical process in action. He was able to distinguish the real from the fake. When Daya broke away from the Afro-Asian Latin American People's Solidarity Movement to form his own committee, a bunch of us, like Ram, Kenny, Bakshi, Ali, and myself, left to join him. During this process, I learned Marxism-Leninism, and Daya inspired me to learn more about the theory and practice of revolution. Daya always had on his heart the revolutionary struggles in India. He knew that revolution is to improve people's livelihood, and for the sake of not for the sake of some political dogma. At the same time, he also supported the struggles in his adopted country, Canada. I remember in the mid-1970s, I was the anti-imperialist organizer of the Workers' Communist Party, and I tried to rally Daya to the party. He wanted to join, but after a series of meetings, we both came to realize that the WCP could not accommodate an intellectual and free thinker of his stature. The party leadership wanted Daya to quit his job at McGill and to move to Toronto to organize East Indians there. Despite his left sectarian stance, Daya continued to be a supporter and sympathizer of the WCP. Daya was an internationalist and a good friend of China, even when it became unfashionable to do so. He was a lifelong Marxist and Maoist. But more importantly, he was a humanist. I remember one stimulating conversation I had with him. He was convinced that both Marx and Mao were humanists. He said to me after the 2008 Beijing Olympics, you know, if it wasn't for Mao, these games would not have taken place. He saw the progress China had made since the revolution. After all, he said, revolution is to give people a better life. We had discussions why former progressives were denouncing China so vehemently for supposedly turning away from socialism. He said, because these people don't really know what socialism is. And in his own enigmatic way, he was realistic and humble enough to say that he didn't know how to build socialism in practice, unlike some academic armchair Marxists. Despite Daya's intimidating academic credentials and his deep knowledge of politics, he was a down-to-earth man of the people. I remember in the 80s, when he was living in a little cottage on Grand Boulevard, he hosted the North American male bonding ritual, the Super Bowl party, even though he didn't know that much about football. And now Steve tells me that it was his idea to organize these parties. Also, when I was going through a rough period of my life, he would bring over some cooked dishes and cook some food in my kitchen. And we would talk through the night. Over the past few months, I didn't know he was so ill. But despite his illness and his dedication in finishing his second book, he had encouraged me to write my own book. And he contributed his thoughts when I asked him to comment on the demise of the Marxist-Leninist movement in the West. I will forever miss Daya. He was a true friend, and he influenced me as he had influenced so many others to work for a better world.
Thank you, William. Just to get the record straight, that time that Daya hosted the Super Bowl party, that's when I was living at his house. And there was no Schwartz's smoking. Our last person who's asked to speak, Minu Gundevia. Minu?
Thank you, Steve. Ladies and gentlemen, I met Daya first in 1976, and I not only came close to Daya, but also his family. I met his children. I was very close to Roli, Rohit, and of course Rahul. And till 2007, I was very close to them, and then Daya left. And I last saw Daya in 2012 when he had come back. I met him in Rahul's residence. So, I mean, being the last speaker, I hope I'm able to do justice to all the people who came before me. The first thing that really struck me about Daya was what he had achieved professionally. I mean, if you think of it, here he was born in 1929 in a small village in UP. This is, India is still under British rule. He is, as Rahul mentioned, in a small hut. He had to travel 8 kilometers to get education. He did his homework in his bullock cart. No running water, no electricity. And where does he end up? He ends up in one of the best universities in Canada. And not only in Canada, but if I'm not mistaken, the 25th best university in the world, McGill, which is completely remarkable and phenomenal for me. The second thing I want to talk about Daya is Daya had, as many of you mentioned, had a razor-sharp mind. If you had to discuss anything with Daya, you had to have 3 qualities. You had to be knowledgeable, you had to be analytical, and you had to be logical. If you didn't have any, if you lacked 1 or 2, he would a little bit lose interest in you, for discussion. Yeah. And then he had a very coy way of coming back, pulling back. I mean, he didn't make you feel as if you were inferior or anything, but he had a very coy way of terminating the discussion. And it was mentioned earlier by Steve that he had an opportunity to stay in Daya's house with Daya, Rahul, and the 4th occupant of that house was me. Yeah. And there were a few light moments that happened in this house at that time when I was staying with Daya. In those days, Rahul and I, we were very young and we were all into bodybuilding and keeping fit. So Rahul and I would go jogging nearby a park. There was a park. He used to live on a Grand Boulevard between Montreal and I forget the other parallel street. And there was a big park over there. So Rahul and I would go jogging over there. So Daya kept seeing us going, and then one day Daya says, "Oh, I'm going to come with you." So Daya comes with us, So here we go, Rahul and I, we start jogging. Daya jogs with us 5 meters, 10 meters, and then he runs out of breath. He finds a bench, pulls out his Dunhill packet of cigarette, king size, lights up the cigarette, takes a few puffs, watches us jog around, and then slowly walks back home. That was Daya's jogging career. Well, it was mentioned earlier by many people that Daya made many contradictory statements, and the one that stuck in my mind was this, and he used many times with me and others also, I noticed. He would say, "Minu, you are right, and yet you are wrong." And then he would go on a long-winded explanation how I was right and wrong at the same time. And at the end of the day, believe it or not, he did manage to convince me that I was right and wrong at the same time. So Daya, I want to end this by addressing directly to Daya. So Daya, if you are listening, I want to tell you this. Today, you are among us here, and yet you are not among us here. Thank you.
Thank you, Minu. We will all dearly miss Daya, this remarkable man, but his legacy lives on, enriching all of humanity. In closing, I think if Daya were here right now, he'd stand up and say to us all, with his subtle smile, "Come, let's talk while we eat. Please join us at the table." And where is the room? It's just follow the crowd. Thank you very much.